our Bibles, please. Revelation 17. We are talking about the fall of Babylon. Revelation 17, please. And as we go through this this evening, it's a little later again. We won't get very far. So my goal was to kind of recap 17, go straight into Revelation 18. That is not going to happen. So. The message may be just a recap. A little bit, we talked about religious Babylon and a small misnomer on that as we get into Revelation 18. You'll see that right at the end because it's kind of a bait and switch that you'll see Babylon do. So if you just finished saying, hey, there's a whole religious Babylon and then there's an economic Babylon, what he's going to do at the end of the chapter is saying, hey, these are basically the same idea, same thing, taken apart at different times, different ways. But there's a whole gamut, two different perspectives, two different facets of the Babylonian influence kingdom that we'll see coming up. If you don't know what I mean, just go back to Revelation chapter 17. And we are looking at the religious side of it. It's talking about the harlot. There is a relationship between the harlot. Now, again, when we talk about the harlot, the great whore, those are terminologies that we're talking about what the Bible is saying, all right? This is not just me like picking at the church of Babylon. This is the terminology, and the idea is because there is this relationship that this church, this end time antichrist, false prophet, beast driven entity, city, church, religious system, all of that is doing something in relationship with the kingdoms of this world. And the kingdoms of this world are getting very rich. Now, we're seeing people talk about the kingdoms. Well, what kingdoms could they be? And they come up with all sorts of questions. Okay, maybe, and they come up with the 10 kingdoms, and it used to be things having to do with the European Union, maybe the NATO, and then maybe it's the United Nations. And there's always been kind of things like that. Interesting fact is that when Woodrow Wilson proposed a certain entity, the League of Nations. How many of you are familiar with the League of Nations, my historian friends? Some of you raised your hands, some of you just smiled. You are of my heart. Okay, so the League of Nations is interesting because during the Great War, World War I, you have this war that took place and had encapsulated so much of the world into it. And with that, Woodrow Wilson proposed the League of Nations. Now, Woodrow Wilson was the son of a Presbyterian pastor. And he wanted to usher in peace. That's what he wanted to do, and talked about peace in our time. And so in the ending of this war, as they were going through, part of the promise was, and there was leaflets all over Europe that were dropped from airplanes, which was a big deal back then because you would literally throw them out of the side of the airplane. All right, it wasn't like they had some kind of special opening. In fact, not part of the message. But one of the things, literally, when they first started using planes for bombs, they would grab the bombs and throw them off the side of the airplane. They were not very accurate. But anyway, they were dropping leaflets all over the place, and they highlighted these separate points, these 14 points, about the League of Nations and how they were going to usher in this peace and make sure that everybody got along and things were going to be great. When he made it into Europe, Woodrow Wilson, after the war, he was greeted as the King of Peace. And people were literally bowing to him on the streets because he was ushering in peace. And anyways, so that kind of gives you the idea. If somebody can provide peace in that way, he'll be received well. If you could provide a big peace in a big way, he'll be received well. And that's what happened with Woodrow Wilson. It didn't work, mostly because he didn't get everything he wanted in the peace agreements. And on top of that, the United States didn't join the League of Nations, which meant when I don't know if I'm boring you with the history. When Mussolini attacks Abyssinia in Africa, then the League of Nations is like, hey, don't do that. And he's like, okay. And then he leaves. They leave. Japan goes and they attack Manchuria, and they decided, yeah, we're not going to let you do that. And so they said, okay. And they just walk out and just keep on going to war. Nobody cared. All right. So they couldn't do anything. So they could not deliver on the peace that they had promised. And so anyway, it was very, very interesting. If somebody can provide that, they will be well received. And so we've seen this over and over again, that people can provide some peace, people will fall over themselves to try to elevate them. And so this individual, and the Bible is going to describe her as the harlot on the beast. And they're not the same person. And the reason we know that is because the beast is going to rise up against the harlot. Okay, so that's something that takes place, which means that they're not the same person. But at the same time, she is that city. And so we'll see that at the very end of the chapter. All of that is to go recap verse number 5, chapter 17. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And so it gives us a few things that mark the harlot. And again, I'm not trying to pull punches here in regards to what this is saying, but the idea of using the terminology of prostitution, and that this is what this woman is like, this one that has lured in so many. And in any ways, this is her MO. This is the way she works, and she's brought in nations to her. And so there's a lot of things. Now, there's a few marks of the harlot's religion. Number 1 is ritualistic spectacle. In verse number 4, it talks about the way this woman is arrayed. She is arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornications. And so there is this elevation, this stuff that really lifts her up in regards to a great deal of wealth, but it's very elevated. So she's really a big deal. We talked about some of the titles that people will give to church leadership. And by the way, not just like certain churches. Sometimes they'll give us those titles as well as Baptists, and most Baptists are pretty good about rejecting those titles. But anyways, secondly, it's I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this part, but I wrote down the term syncretistic theology. The concept is that this is a religious system that seems to spawn a lot of things. So it's not a single religious system. And part of the reasons why this is important is a lot of people think, well, what's going to happen is there's going to be one religion, and that's going to be everything, except that which her name is Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. So she is the great harlot, but she's the mother of harlots, which is what? It's plural, exactly, plural. And so she's the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And so you have these multiple things. And so she's, if you will, giving birth to many false systems. And so there's a lot of things going on with that, and which would make a lot of sense, because the question is, how in the world do you tie in all these religions together? And they're all going to fight each other, aren't they? Yeah, probably, because the mother of harlots would be able to unite multiple religions together, which is something that people are trying to do, an ecumenical type movement of let's get everybody together. We're all practically the same. We all believe the same God. We're all just different paths to the same God in salvation, which is entirely an impossibility. It's an impossibility because Jesus says so. Jesus says there's only one way, that he is the one way, and all these other systems are systems apart from him, and it's not possible. Even if they include him, they include something else, which would make it impossible. And so think about it. We just had Diwali back October 18th, I think it was. That was the Hindu New Year. You have a bunch of other religions. You think, well, how do you tie in the Hindus and the Muslims, which are constantly at war with each other, with the quote unquote Christian groups throughout the world, and Catholicism and all that? How do you? Well, she's the mother of harlots, and so it allows a broader group to consolidate that influence and power. There's the global influence. If you look down to verse number 1, it ends at the very end of verse 1. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Same thing, go down to verse number 15. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest. So he's explaining what this means. Where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So it's not just one place or a certain region. It's all over the world. It's pretty much everywhere. And her influence is global. The other part is talks about spiritual adultery. I know we're going back and forth through the chapter, but we're moving kind of quickly. Verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. And so there is some benefit that they're getting from their association with her, and some I think spiritual adultery is difficult to use the word fidelity with, but the point is that there's some kind of relationship there between the kings of the earth and her, and so they're all tied in together. By the way, her character is that of persecution. In verse number 6, I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Talking about the character of her, that she's a persecutor, and so this is a consistent thing in her character, and obviously that's tied in with her influence around the world. So it's not just in one location. And then one of the big things is her political entanglement. In verse number 3, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. So the woman is on top of the beast, and yet she is not the beast. And we see a little bit more of that, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, which he explains, which we went over last week. All right, so let's go down a little bit further. So that's kind of just a broad view in regards to the harlot and the character of the harlot that we see in this chapter. Go down to verse number 16, please. And in verse 15, we read that already. The many waters is basically, this is global. This is a worldwide influence of different groups, different cultures, different religions, all tied in to some loyalty to her. They're involved. What they produce is bad. It's described as fornication, but it's also just an array of abominations, things that are contrary to what God has established as right. And so there's a push for that. There's a global push for an abomination against God, or many abominations against God. In verse 16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked. Excuse me, sorry. Excuse me. Try to hold it in. All right, shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And so what you have here in verse number 16 is the 10 horns on the harlot. They turn against her. They turn against this one. And this is important because it's explaining how things are going to come apart, how they're going to take place. And it gives us a little glimpse of that back in Daniel chapter number 7. And you see in fact, in Daniel chapter number 2 as well, where you see Rome, for instance. Rome is the bottom of the statue. And as the bottom of the statue, it's the feet that you'll see with 10 toes. And in any ways, this is one of the things that you will find later on. You see another beast in Daniel chapter 7, this dragon-type figure that you have all these different heads and stuff and different horns. And there's these 10 horns. And so there's these 10 in the end times, and these are a continuation of Rome, the 10 toes of Rome. Rome has not disappeared. It's kind of remanifesting in different ways. I don't know if you know Benito Mussolini. Anybody heard of that guy? His stated goal was to revive the glory of the Roman Empire. And so his goal was to be the emperor, in fact, self-declared as such. And so he wasn't just, well, I want a great Italy. No, it was the Roman Empire specifically. Their capital is Rome. And so anyways, there is this hatred that takes place. The word hate in the Bible is not just like, oh, we don't like that person. That's how we loosely use hate nowadays. The word hate is far more active when it comes to the Bible. So for instance, when God would apply hatred to something, he's literally talking about judgment. So he can both love and hate an individual. He can share love. He sent his son Jesus Christ to die for an individual, but yet he will apply judgment on one he has loved. And the idea of that judgment would be considered by the Bible hatred. And so he is doing something. And so for them, these tend to rise up in hatred against her. They're doing something. They're rejecting her. They will literally be fighting her. They make her desolate, so they're stripping her of power. They're exposing her shame. Before you think I'm just like making this stuff up, I'll explain why we think this. But literally stripping her of what she has, and then handing her over to those that would had previously been her lovers, that had been a part of this relationship, and they're taking everything. They eat her flesh. Now, Again, this is not a single individual, and so anyways, they eat her flesh, and this is a very graphic language. And by the way, when you read this verse, it should seem kind of shocking, right? You read this, and if you're kind of like, okay, it was just another day, you're missing the point of this. Is a very shocking thing that takes place. They eat her flesh. It's very graphic language, and it has to do with the idea of utter destruction, where they are turning against her and plundering what she has. They burn her with fire. This is complete annihilation. And it's an instrument of judgment. It's an instrument of final judgment. When in AD 70, when Titus goes to Rome, one of the things that takes place there is they're trying to, when Titus takes over Jerusalem is what I meant. In AD 70, you have Titus that goes through in the 3 sections of the city that they're breaking through Jerusalem. And what had happened is they kept on trying to preserve stuff, and the Jewish revolt kept on just going out and retaking parts of the city. So their last plan was, let's burn it all down on the way out, on the way in. And so every time they take apart, they burn the whole thing down, so the way the Jews couldn't reconquer. And then one section after another until the entire city of Jerusalem had been burned to the ground. Not one stone left on top of another. And that the idea of the fire was that final touch. It was finally consumed. And so the idea, which by the way, Jesus prophesied that event that would take place. But anyways, in this case, what we're finding is that she is destroyed. Now, there's a problem with that, is that when we think about this one that's destroyed, is who destroys her in this passage? According to verse number 16, which we just read. The 10 horns. That sounds a little different than what God does, doesn't he? Doesn't it? Because, you can look at other language, which, by the way, if you want comparisons, I encourage you to study this on your own. We won't have time to look through it. But the book of Ezekiel and Isaiah use the same exact terminology when it describes destruction, even in Jerusalem. And later on, in regards to the fall of Babylon. And so you have the same language. So when you see this language here, thinking, what in the world is it talking about? You go back to the book of Ezekiel and Isaiah, and you see where that language, when it's expanded, it gives you a bigger picture of what's actually taking place. And that's Ezekiel 16, Ezekiel 23 as well. Ezekiel 5 is a good chapter as well for that understanding. And then Isaiah, all over the place. All right, so 15, 16, 17, 34, different sections that cover that. But anyway, so this type of destruction is prophesied. It's expanded with what's taking place there. And so she's destroyed, but look at the next verse, verse 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree. Now that's a miracle right there. You get 10 kingdoms, 10 kings, 10 nations that are like, all right, let's all agree that this one that's making us rich, let's get rid of her. And they all agree. And they agreed specifically to God's will and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. All right, so you have this thing that takes place where there is the woman who has the power, and now it's given to the beast specifically. A lot of that is actually explained through the book of Daniel in regards to the way it's broken up, the rising, the tearing down of a couple of the kings, and the little horn that springs up. And anyways, you can look at that on your own as well. But what's happening here is there's a shift of power, and this relationship of the one that's on the beast is now where the beast actually will take advantage of it, and now he's in charge. So this is a point in which the Antichrist comes into full power. This comes into full power there over the city. You'll notice in verse number 18, okay, I'm sorry, I missed the point of verse number 17. This is very important. When it comes to verse number 17, God allows, and the way that he does things is that he pulls the strings to make sure the judgments happen. And so you have these 10 guys, these 10 kings, these rulers that make a decision, that they all agree. And they turn on someone that's enriching them, giving them stuff. And it's not because, well, there was a global 10-country revival that they all got right with God. But literally, this would be similar to the Old Testament when God would take the will of an individual and use that will to accomplish his own will. For instance, Babylon, when you have Nebuchadnezzar, who in the great might of his power builds the kingdom of Babylon. Look at the city that I have made, and look at these things that I have done. And he goes and conquers and does all sorts of stuff. And then God humbles him, saying, hey, I'm the one that got that for you. All right, so that's the idea. And same thing with Assyria, same thing that you would have with the Medo-Persian Empire, with Darius, and all the things that happen. God takes the free will of these individuals and yet turns the heart of the king whithersoever he will. This is what takes place, and this is what takes place tenfold with these different kings. And so anyways, what ends up happening at the end of verse number 17? Until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Verse 18, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Now, you'll notice that what takes place in verse 17 is that these 10 kings give their kingdom unto the beast. And so they're now, you have this whole power grab by the beast that has turned on this harlot. There's a lot of questions in regards to how this actually takes place. There's some speculation. I have some opinions that I don't have time to formulate this evening, but having to do with the abomination of desolations that occurs, which takes place in the temple in Jerusalem right around the 3.5-year mark of the 70th week. And so by that point, it seems that the harlot's religious system is in full effect. But right after that, he is given this opportunity to take his power for a time and have time right after that. And so it seems that the transition takes place there. So things are falling apart. Things are falling apart for the harlot in some way, except for the reality is she's just kind of dissipated into just a kind of remanifestation of the beast as far as the city goes. The city is not gone. The city is still very powerful, just the beast is running things more directly now. Seems like a religion's kind of going away. And anyways, we'll start in chapter 18 for a quick moment, and then we'll be done for tonight. And after these things, and so this first vision that ends, the question is, what does it mean after these things? Does it mean chapter 18 comes after 17 in regards to after these things, or is it just another thing that occurs? Well, that generally, it could be both. It could be either one, but I do believe that the events of chapter 17 happen before chapter 18. But something gets declared that I think is very important. So you have, after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. The idea of this huge illumination that takes place around the world. So it's something that can be seen. In verse number 2, and he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Now, we saw that she has fallen in regards to, hey, they've turned against her. They've turned against the harlot. That's what we saw. And she is that great city. And then he says, Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen. But it's already explained to us back in verse number 17 and 18 that the beast is now in charge. They've handed it over to him. So he's going to keep leading the charge. Even though there's this declaration of things are falling apart. Now, the way this is going to fall apart, chapter 18 is going to go into the stuff as far as the physical, the wealth, the opulence that's going to be gone away with, the mourning that's going to take place throughout the world for this economic loss that they're all about to have, and we won't have time to get into that this evening. So, anyways, is fallen. There's certainty with that statement. Isaiah chapter 21 verse 9 says that same thing, talking about the fall of Babylon back in Isaiah 21 verse 9. Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. Jeremiah 51:8 says, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Her fall is huge. It's prophesied. It's something very, very specific. In Isaiah 13, it gives a picture of the devastation, the destruction that takes place about Babylon, and it goes through about how it's never going to be inhabited again, and that the wild beasts will basically hunt the creatures in there, and it's going to be a wreck. It's going to be terrible. And so, anyways, but we'll go into that starting in verse 3-ish next week and see if we can cover some ground. But let's go ahead and finish for this evening. Let's pray. God, I thank you for tonight and the opportunity to open your word, even just for a little while as we study your word. I pray, God, that we would be helped in our knowing that even when it seems that things are going great for the world, that you are still coordinating events, that your judgment is still sure, or the judgment that you have is going to take place, and even worse than what they think it will be during that time. I know that the full judgment doesn't fully show up yet in what we've read, and there's much more to come. And I pray, Lord, that you would help us in our understanding in regards to what you have for us, that we do not need to be discouraged about the events that are taking place. God, I thank you that you're on the throne. You see the events that are going on, that you're fulfilling your will in your way, in your timing. God, I thank you that you've laid it out for us. You've explained to us this is what you'll be doing. What a joy it is to know that regardless of all our imaginations and our thinking and what we can accomplish, God, you are all powerful, and nobody can rule with the power that you have, Father. No one can take that from us. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to be your servants and to read these truths. I ask your blessing on us as we head home this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.